Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jay Selby. I am the president of SSEC. I'm alongside Brandon Coppedge, our vice president. A little bit about our company. We were founded in 1968 by my father, and I literally grew up in this industry. When my dad started the company, the EPA and the Clean Water Act had not even been formed yet. So we've seen a lot of changes throughout the years.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Brandon Coppedge. I got in the industry about 15 years ago and really truly enjoyed it. Ended up getting my SSEC pretty early on in my career and my QSP shortly thereafter. About 10 years ago, I started with Jay Selby and the SSEC group, where about 5 years into it, I got offered a partnership and a vice president position. Took that, and since then we've started growing throughout the Northwest. We've opened up 2 other offices up in Washington and Idaho. We are now servicing almost all of the Northwest and hoping to grow a little bit more here in the future.
When I was very young, the Oakland fires broke out, and my dad was involved in the post-fire erosion control for the project. They were dealing with very steep terrain hillsides, and the basic hydroseeding methods at that time just weren't strong enough to endure the steepness of those slopes. So they rolled out blankets on these really steep slopes. It was really dangerous for the crews that were doing it. And this is where the invention of the BFM really came in, the bonded fiber matrix. A heavier duty product that could hold up to very steep terrain for the purpose of revegetation. In the mid-90s, we really noticed that the Forestry Service took a very strong approach to these fires, these wildfires, where they started being very proactive after the fires, and they contracted a lot of projects like the one we were involved with in Lake Tahoe called the Angora Fire, where we got to use 5 fixed-wing aircraft that could hold 800 gallons in their belly, and they would drop hydromulch over the burn scar areas that were inaccessible by equipment. Then they also started using straw bombs, and although this was cheaper than aerial hydroseeding, the wind would generally blow most of the straw off the project, so it was less effective. But in the last 10 years, we really saw a decline in the Forestry Service role in post-fire erosion control. Also in that same year of 2007, we got involved in the San Diego firestorm, where the Santa Ana winds just spread that fire all throughout the San Diego area, and it burned many hillsides that we were worried about homes being lost. We were worried about mudslides on roadways. And I worked with Mike Harding on that project, along with another group of Southern California hydroseeders that worked alongside us. And we really got in there, and we worked fast, effectively, and covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. In 2013, we were a prime contractor for Caltrans on, at the time, the biggest fire we'd had in California, which was the Rim Fire located in Yosemite. We had about 20 miles of roadway impact leading into Yosemite. And it was a really nice change of pace because we were prime contractor on it. We got to kind of experiment a little bit and also make it a case study, since we were on the project for over a year and a half. We had a little different approach than Caltrans has now on the Rim Fire, whereas we didn't clear all the trees out up front. We cleared trees that we needed to for safety and for driver safety and pedestrian safety, but we left a lot of them intact, and we blitzed the thing with hydroseeding. As you can see here, in the before and afters, the BMP crews jumped to the steeper drainage points where we had culverts running underneath the road, and they stabilized them while the hydroseeders were working in areas that were more wide open. If you can see in this picture, the areas that are not treated on the upper right-hand side show zero vegetation. And these two pictures were taken, the first one was taken in September, October, and the follow-up pictures were taken in March, April of the spring. As you can see in these before and afters as well, how we did leave some of the debris, some of the burnt down trees in play, but cleared out enough for drainage. And again, in the spring, we had great vegetation and great restoration. In this photograph, it's hard to see, but down the bottom of the basin, this is the first time we'd ever used a trash rack and sandbags to handle really heavy debris flow. And although it did take a little bit of maintenance in the wintertime, look at the after picture from the next spring. This was also the first time that I have ever, at least, used bonded fiber matrix in post-fire, and we really saw what a superior product it was and how well it had worked. The BFMs of the Oakland fire days were nothing like the BFMs of today. Interestingly, there are a lot of species of plant life that only come out after a fire is burned. And that was kind of a cool thing up in Yosemite. We saw wildflowers that have not bloomed in nearly 100 years the next spring. So it does show you that the forest is meant to burn from time to time. About 7 or 8 years ago, we did a project in Pocatello, Idaho, where really steep terrain, a lot of expensive homes below it. Luckily, the homes weren't burned down, but they were very concerned about mudslides and possibly losing the home in the future from that. So it just shows you here where, a lot of times the equipment struggles getting there, but, sometimes you have to chain up to dozers with all-wheel drive equipment just to get the job done.
In 2015, we got a call to come out to the Valley Fire, which is when we started seeing a lot of changes. We were used to, and all the fires we talked about prior to this, we were dealing with, rural areas that didn't really have much population at all, or mainly forest fires. And this was our first call to come out to a fire that, we had lost over 500 homes. And shortly, a couple days after we were getting ramped up on that, we got a call about the Butte Fire, which sort of came into play at the same time, right towards the end of the summer, beginning of fall. We were lucky enough back then that we were able to come in as a T&M project, sort of, and get in there as fast as we could and start covering up before the rains hit. It was actually a pretty wet year that year. We were able to really reduce soil loss and erosion because we were able to get in there quickly. We were able to, we had multiple crews putting in BMPs and then multiple seeders running around trying to encapsulate areas, of high erosion, and really started to see a change and really see what, seeing homes being devastated and trying to protect them, and then also dealing with access to these areas. At the time, it was a very rural area, so we'd drive a long ways to get to certain houses. And
and it was also a shift where we had to really deal with homeowners that had just lost everything they have. And so, not like a Caltrans job where we send crews out, they do their job, they get out of there. Now we had to have sensitivity training for our crews so that they knew how to deal with these people that have lost everything, and now you're trying to access their land and they're very hesitant to let you. So it was a shift not only in our industry, but also how our employees had to deal with this.
I agree. I mean, we had guys that were yelling and screaming what kind of seed we were putting in the seed tank, what we were spraying that was green all over their property. And that probably lead to a lot more problems, that we didn't really have maybe a permission to be on some of these sites because we were in there so soon, but Cal Recycle was pretty new to it too. They sort of got stuck in with this. They didn't really have any kind of fire training or anything. So between the general contractors, ourselves, and the owners, we were really just making our own roadmap on how to build all this and how to try to be sensitive to the neighbors, but also protect the environment all at the same time.
And these homes were in the Napa surrounding area and the San Andreas area of California. And a lot of these homes were built in the 40s and 50s when permitting was different. And so they were never even allowed to rebuild their homes because they didn't have enough footprint for a proper septic system to today's standards or well to today's standards. So these were complete losses in a lot of cases that they never even got to rebuild their homes. You know, the one thing about wildfires, at least on the West Coast here, is they're always happening at the end of fall when everything's really dry, and we only have a few months to jump in there and really try to protect the areas that have been destroyed. And Santa Rosa really was a learning tool for us, although it was a horrible devastation. Complete neighborhoods wiped out. This wasn't a spotty house here or a spotty house there up in the foothills. This was entire neighborhoods completely decimated. When I drove into the fire zone on my own accord, just to try to help out and see what we could get going with the city of Santa Rosa to help the situation, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I mean, there was over 6,000 homes burnt, over 4,000 homes just in a neighborhood called Coffee Park. And believe you me, it took me back on my heels. There was still smoke in the air everywhere. I ended up meeting with the Water Quality Control Board and the city of Santa Rosa. Nobody knew what to do. Half of the city workers had lost their homes. Part of the police force, fire department, everybody had lost homes. And it was a total city in disarray. I ended up staying the night. I didn't plan on it. And I didn't pack any clothes, so I went over to Kmart just to get some, basic necessities, and the shelves were completely wiped out. And you just makes you realize how much that everybody there had lost.
Funny, because I remember going up there, we just finished a widening on 101, and when you had told me that the Taco Bell across the street had burned down, I couldn't believe that it was even possible that fire was able to jump across 8 lanes of freeway and median and 2 shoulders to actually burn across it. When I was up there speaking with one of the highway patrolmen at the closures where the National Guard and everybody else were lined up, they were explaining they were there watching that fire go horizontal, and that's how it got into these neighborhoods and just plowed through neighborhoods like you couldn't believe. The fires before we dealt with, we'd been through 5 or 6 fires already by now, in just the recent couple last years. And coming to that one, and Jay, I couldn't believe him once he was telling me what was going on. He had been up there for a day or two by the time I got there, and once we, started really looking over the whole site and how rugged some of the terrain was up above, where the homes were built on the hills, and then you had small neighborhoods or large neighborhoods that were completely devastated, trailer parks and everything else, hotels, along the lines of all the commercial buildings that were burnt down. It was definitely a sight.
And then the National Guard was there really to protect all the homeowners' belongings. You don't think about this, but when natural disasters like this happen, the looting that goes along with it is incredible. So the only reason that we were allowed in there is that we had an escort from the city, but they had completely blocked off roads and intersections, not letting anybody near these home sites. So when I first met with the city of Santa Rosa, they didn't really have a plan at all. They knew they needed to do erosion control. They knew it was necessary. They knew they had a lot of really steep country in the Fountain Grove area. And they told me what they had in budget to get started and the acreage that they thought that they wanted to cover. So literally I had to go out there with severe burn maps overlay them with terrain maps, and use drones to figure out what would be the best use of the money they had to get the most covered areas we could. When this fire happened, we were actually really busy working on other fires as well as just normal construction projects. So we reached out to a company we worked with for a lot of years out of Colorado, and a good personal friend of mine, and had them help us out by bringing equipment out here and manpower to help tackle Santa Rosa. And in that time frame of working with them, we really realized that drones can be utilized in a lot more areas than we had anticipated. So that led Corey to develop this new company, SolSpec, that uses LiDAR technology to really overlay severity burn maps, show the slide points, the trigger points. They can calculate the debris flow. And this is really where the future is heading with post-fire analysis.
I totally agree, Jay, with the droning, but this also kick-started SSEC and Selby's into redividing our equipment. You know, our big goal was to have 4,000 gallon trucks so we could, cover mass areas quickly. But what we found out in some of the smaller fires and tighter areas that we just couldn't get to some of these areas. So went back to the drawing board a little bit and got creative and ordered a 3,000 gallon tank that sat on a 6x6 that was way under geared, so that we were able to climb steeper slopes, turn into tighter areas, get into some of those tighter spots that just weren't accessible on some of the bigger trucks. We've even found in some of the more recent fires that we've encountered, getting into some areas that even those trucks wouldn't fit. So we've even adapted, where we use our smaller tow behinds. We've even adapted some cannons with side-by-sides and UTV vehicles, so we can pull out a half mile of hose and be able to spray from a distance where no truck could ever get, or even a smaller tow behind getting in those tight areas. I think that some of the other sites have even been more hurdles, where I know Jay's done some other creative ideas with some other material manufacturers like...
We during the campfire, we had a lot of areas we couldn't access by really anything besides UTVs. So we went to pelletized mulch that we could utilize our UTVs and tractors with spreaders to get to areas. The campfire had a lot of tricky spots to it and a lot of bridges with weight capacity that there's no way that you could ever get hydro seeding equipment across it. Really small, underrated bridges. And I think, we talked about aerial applications earlier on. Think about the weight savings of taking the water out of the hydro mulch and going to a pelletized mulch. That's huge. Now your helicopters and things like that are really much more efficient. I talked to a lot of other hydro seeders, and we all say the same thing. There's about a month out of the year you could use 3 times the amount of hydro seeders you have in your fleet. So that kind of led us to create a batch plant. So our batch plant we named Mulchzilla. It has an 8,000 gallon capacity and can transfer 4,000 gallons into a hydro seeder in 90 seconds. Now that's really key because when you're really crunched for time and you don't have enough equipment, instead of either filling off a water truck or fire hydrant, that typically takes 45 minutes to fill the water and to throw all the mulch in there, throw the seed in there. While the hydro seeder's out spraying, the batch plant's got everything ready to go. The hydro seeder pulls up, 90 seconds later they leave full, mixed, and ready to spray.
The other big need for the batch plant was our aerial operations. We needed something that we could, once we find a landing zone or an airport, we needed something we could set up quickly without pulling away from our main fleet for all our construction. Fires always seem to go right when we're our busy erosion control season, right? And with that same take, we got to be able to have something we could set up as the planes or helicopters come in. We can fill them up and get them back going. Jet fuel, and it costs a lot. So when they're sitting on the ground not doing anything, and then our fleet's tied up trying to trying to refill these guys up as quick as possible. The batch plant was a necessity that we had to bake. It took a lot of design. It took a lot of Jay's time to actually go in and build this and design. It's a one of a kind at this point, but its need was invaluable when we need it.
So the more arrows we have in our quiver, the more options for equipment, getting into hard to reach places, the better off we've found. When you think of Caltrans, you think of huge highways, wide lanes, but I just got done doing a project for Caltrans in the San Jose area on Highway 130. Now, I've worked in that area my whole life, and I've never even heard of Highway 130. And there's a reason why I never heard of it. It was 20 miles of the narrowest road I've ever been on. You couldn't go over 15 to 20 miles an hour on most of it. 2 cars could barely pass. So it just comes to show you that you need all different size equipment to cover these post-fire situations. So a couple of years ago, I got involved in a project that was very different than I have been involved with as far as post-fire, because it was 100% geared towards wildlife. In fact, it was geared towards the salmon. So I never really thought about it before, but all the sediment that comes off of burned areas that goes down to the tributaries ends up in the creeks and rivers, and that's where salmon spawn. Now, if the salmon have nowhere to lay their eggs because sediment has filled all the crevices around the boulders on the bottom of the riverbed, then the salmon population suffers. Again, on this project, we were the prime contractor, so we had control of timing and the flow of the pace of the job. And as you can see through these photographs, we had really great vegetation, very little sediment loss on this project. And if you look kind of the back of some of the slides, you can actually see areas that were untreated with 0 vegetation. Again, this shows the importance of timing. Again, we talked about how fires are always in the fall and winter setting in, the rainy season setting in. And the projects that are the least successful ones that we've seen are the ones that get tied up in too much bureaucracy, too much pre-planning, putting BMP installment to the forefront when we could be covering 95% of the job with hydroseeders and blitzing it.
Not only is timing critical, but materials are too. The last dozen or so projects that we've had with Caltrans, we're seeing a very successful trend of not only just upgrading the materials than just the everyday, standard materials, but using materials like a compost alternative, like a Proganics, that is definitely a growth medium that helps us out greatly, getting the nutrients back into after the fires have burned. A lot of the fires lately have trend to be a lot hotter than some of the fires we've dealt with in the past. So we're trying to recondition the soil to get the seeds to establish quickly, and without doing any kind of soil amendment, our success is a lot lower percentage rate. So on top of that, we've been covering it with a flexible growth medium, which has been giving us a great opportunity to handle the severe weather, heavy rains, stuff like that. It's a far superior product. I mean, if you go back to the Oakland fire, when they first came out with the BFM, it couldn't hold up a candle to the standard BFM now. And then all of a sudden you take that and you go to a flexible growth medium that will hold on to a side of a slope that I'll stop by there the next year and it'll still be there and you can still visibly see it. It's very impressive. So we're liking the trending that Caltrans doing, and we hope that some more of the other districts get on board with it. And we have a lot of projects that we can show the success and makes it worth spending the extra money to put the proper product down to hold it. We just got finished up with a fire down south. The owner was willing for us to work with them and put down a product, similar to what Caltrans is doing. And we were able to really come in there and blitz hillsides, very mountain terrain, and covered up a lot of it before these first couple rains. Luckily this year we've Mother Nature's been good and given us a lot of extra time to be able to apply all this stuff. We're in December and barely got a couple inches down of rain. So we had a great year for as much fires as we had.
At the end of the day, we have noticed that all the successful projects that we've had have been about great teamwork and great partnerships. When you can get a kickoff meeting to a new project with everybody on the same page, the same goal, the same nervousness about the rain settling in, and the urgency of these jobs is really where the sweet spot is on having successful jobs. Don't you agree, Brandon?
Oh yeah, I mean, all the way from when you talk about inspectors and manufacturers, I mean, we're all in it for the same goal, right? We're all trying to protect, the environment. We're trying to be understanding to the homeowner that's lost his home. We're trying to keep the roads open so that the firefighters still can get in and out. We've had projects that were right behind the firefighters trying to stabilize the slopes on the side of the roads for them. We're not doing it for anything else, just to keep everything flowing and working. And we've had manufacturers work with us and jump truckloads to us that should have took 2 days to get there. They've gotten there in a day. Even the truck driver that delivered it, he cares. The inspectors, we've had in the campfire, we had projects where we actually had to have armed guards get us to the site. It takes everybody. It's a team.
Yeah, speaking about the campfire, there's only 2 access roads that lead into the Paradise area. And so Caltrans was really proactive on getting us up there, getting us working. I mean, can you imagine having a mudslide and shut down access while they're still trying to do body searches? It was really, really a rough thing to go through. And partnering is even more so, like Brandon was talking about. When we are doing night work, we have highway patrol supporting us in traffic control. So it takes a lot of agencies, a lot of pre-planning to have a successful project.
And a lot of compassion. We've not only are the owners of the homes displaced, also the animals. I mean, we go out there and there's boards of missing dogs and cats, and one of our crews actually did find some animals. And you talk about teamwork. They had to call the animal control, to get the animal. That animal got to a vet and got healthy again and actually got back to its owners. And there's millions of those stories. So the compassion is probably one of the biggest things out there is, being compassionate about the poor highway patrolman that's been working, 18 hours, or National Guard that's been standing out there all night long, all the way up to our drivers and our sprayers and contractors and inspectors that are trying to inspect this all day long and go back to a hotel. They probably don't even live in this state, It's amazing how many people that really stretch to make these fires get closed up and get done. It's not just the contractors out there that are doing them. So I know that we didn't really dive too deep on everything. We're contractors, so we're better at that on the fly. You guys give us a question, we'll give you the best answer we can. We're more than willing to take the next couple minutes here and go over some other stuff. Jay, you got anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, after this is said and done, if any of you guys want to reach out to us, any questions in the future, feel free to. Easiest thing, just jump on our website, selbysoil.com, or SSEC. Just Google that and you'll find us, and we'll be happy to assist in any way we can. We already do it for most of the agencies for free now, and we have no problem doing it for you guys in the future. Thank you.